My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 29 years old, and I grew up believing that family meant safety, that no matter how bad things got, your parents would stand by you. But that belief shattered the night my father demanded that I pay for my sister's mistake. It was late March, the kind of chilly evening where spring fights to push through the cold. I remember standing by the window of my apartment in Chicago, watching the lights flicker on in the building across the street. My phone buzzed, Dad calling. For a second, I hesitated. We hadn't spoken much since Christmas, when I'd refused to lend my sister more money. But I picked up because no matter how much I tried to distance myself, a part of me still hoped my family would change. "Rachel, come by the house tonight," he said, his tone brisk, commanding. "It's important." I drove over, stomach tight with unease. The Carter's house, the one I grew up in, sat at the edge of town, big enough to feel cold even when the heat was on. I hadn't lived there in years, but stepping through the front door still made my chest tighten. Everything looked the same. My mother's porcelain vases, the grandfather clock that chimed every hour, the smell of my father's aftershave lingering in the air. He was sitting in his study when I walked in, a place filled with books he never read and awards he loved to polish. His eyes lifted from his desk. "You took your time." "I came straight from work," I said, setting my purse down. "You said it was important." He didn't waste a second. "Your sister's in trouble." My stomach dropped. "Again?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "She took out a personal loan last year. $35,000. Now she's defaulted, and the collectors are calling the house. They threatened legal action." I blinked. "That's a lot of money. Why would she?" He cut me off. "I don't care why. What matters is that you're the only one who can fix this." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "What do you mean, fix this?" "She took the loan, not me." He slid a paper across the desk, a crumpled letter from the bank. "You make good money, Rachel. You don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. You'll pay it off."
The words hit like a slap.
"I won't," I said slowly, feeling my pulse quicken. "I've already helped her twice. I paid her rent when she lost her job, and I covered her car payments for 3 months. You promised that would be the last time." His eyes hardened. "She's your sister." "And she's 32, Dad." My voice trembled. "She's not a child. She keeps making bad choices and expecting everyone else to clean them up." He sighed, that long, disappointed exhale he always used to make me feel small. "You've always been selfish, Rachel. You think just because you have a fancy degree and some office job you're better than the rest of us. But when family needs you, you don't turn your back." I felt the heat rise in my face. "I'm not turning my back. I'm setting a boundary, something you've never done with her." He stood abruptly, towering over the desk. "You'll pay the debt. I've already spoken to the bank. They'll expect your payment by the end of the month." It was then that I realized this wasn't a request. It was an order. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You went behind my back to arrange this? Are you even listening to yourself?"
His jaw tightened.
"I'm your father. You'll do as I say." That sentence, those 5 words, were the last straw. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of his control. What I studied, who I dated, where I worked. He'd disguised his manipulation as guidance, and I'd mistaken obedience for love. But that night, something inside me snapped. "No," I said quietly. "I won't do it." He froze, as if he couldn't believe I'd defied him. "Excuse me?" I said no. My voice was shaking, but steady enough. "If you want to help her, go ahead. But I'm done cleaning up her messes." For a long, tense moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. "You're no longer part of this family." The words hit harder than any slap. I grabbed my purse and left before the tears could fall. As I stepped into the night, I could still hear the grandfather clock chime, as if marking the end of something sacred. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how love could curdle into something so ugly. By morning, I'd made a decision that terrified me as much as it freed me. I was done being the dependable daughter, the one who sacrificed everything for people who only took. I was done explaining myself to a man who measured worth in obedience. So I began to disappear. It wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. I called my boss and requested remote work for family reasons. I sold my furniture, closed my lease, deleted social media, and redirected my mail to a new address. Every action felt surreal, like I was erasing a version of myself that had lived too long in fear. Within 3 weeks, Rachel Carter, the obedient daughter, the reliable sister, no longer existed. I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, a small town tucked between the Blue Ridge Mountains. I rented a quiet cabin on the edge of town, surrounded by pines and mist. It was peaceful, almost eerily so, but it gave me space to think, to breathe. The first few days were disorienting. I kept expecting my father to call, or my sister to text with another plea for help. But there was nothing. Only silence. And in that silence, I started to see things clearly. My sister, Vanessa, had always been the golden child. Beautiful, charming, reckless, she could talk her way out of anything. I was the opposite. Cautious, quiet, the one who got things done. My parents loved her sparkle and resented my stability. I used to think helping her was my duty, that maybe if I gave enough, I'd finally earn their approval. But now, sitting in that cabin with the wind whispering through the trees, I realized I'd been playing a losing game my whole life. Still, guilt gnawed at me. I kept thinking about my mother, kind but passive, always caught between us. I wondered if she knew how far things had gone. But when I called her the next week, she didn't answer. Then, 2 days later, I got a text. "Mom, your father says you've abandoned the family. Don't make things worse." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. I didn't abandon anyone. I just stopped letting you use me." She never replied. That night, I walked outside into the chill mountain air and looked up at the stars. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, fragile, uncertain, but real. I didn't know it then, but my disappearance would set off a chain of events that would expose more than just my family's betrayal. It would uncover secrets my father had buried for years, and when I returned, I wouldn't come back as the same obedient daughter he once controlled. Because when people push you to your breaking point, they forget that broken things can still be sharp. And I was done bleeding for anyone. I woke up the next morning with my decision already made. I didn't need to debate it anymore. The silence in my apartment felt like the first real peace I'd had in years. No father's voice shouting about duty, no sister's tear-soaked manipulation, no guilt echoing through the walls. Just quiet. But peace has a strange way of turning into loneliness when you're used to chaos. I sat at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at the clock on the wall. Every tick sounded like an accusation. You left them. You walked away. And yet, for the first time, I wasn't drowning in regret, just exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your bones after years of trying to please people who never saw your worth. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Dad, you think you can just run away? Your sister needs you. Be an adult for once in your life." I didn't reply. I deleted the message, but his words burned anyway. Be an adult for once. He had no idea how many times I'd sacrificed my own future to keep his version of adulthood alive. Rent money handed over for my sister's emergencies. Savings drained for her bad business ventures. Even the car I'd worked 2 years for, sold because she had a loan shark problem.
No.
This time I was done. I packed what little I needed, a duffel bag of clothes, my laptop, the cash I'd managed to hide away, and I left. Not just my apartment. Not just the city. I drove 5 hours straight to a coastal town I'd visited once on a college trip. A place called Brentmore Bay, known for its quiet streets, sea breeze, and anonymity. By the time I checked into a small motel near the harbor, the sun was melting into the ocean, turning the sky gold and crimson. For the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath without feeling like I owed someone an apology. That night, I dreamt of my mother. She died when I was 22, a soft-spoken woman with sad eyes and hands that smelled like rosemary and soap. She was the buffer between me and my father's disappointment, between me and my sister's demands. I could almost hear her voice as I slept. You don't have to save everyone, Ava.
Ava.
That's me. 29 years old and finally realizing I had spent most of my adult life trying to be the family's emotional currency. When I woke, my cheeks were wet. I sat up, wiping my face, feeling that ache of missing her all over again. If she were here, she'd understand. She always did. I spent the next few days in quiet routine, waking early, walking along the shore, working remotely on my graphic design freelance projects.
I didn't talk to anyone. Didn't check social media.
Didn't answer unknown numbers. It was strange how quickly you could disappear when nobody truly cared where you went, only what you could give. But on the fourth day, my past came knocking again. A call. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then another. Then a message. Unknown. Ava, it's Dad. Your sister's in trouble again. If you don't help, she could go to jail. I stared at the screen, my pulse tightening. A few minutes later, another message followed. Dad, you're selfish. You ran away when your family needed you most. That word again, selfish. The one they'd used all my life to keep me tethered to their chaos. I could almost hear his voice, the low, stern tone that made me feel 12 years old again, standing in the kitchen after he'd found out I'd spent my own money on art supplies instead of giving it to my sister. You think your hobbies matter more than family? He'd said, slamming my sketchbook shut. I threw my phone onto the bed and walked outside. The sea wind hit my face, sharp and cold. I wanted to scream into the horizon, to ask why being born into a family meant being their permanent scapegoat. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the motel window, watching the rain fall, and I made myself a promise. Not the kind you make when you're scared, but the kind that changes you. I would not go back. I would not pay her debts. And if my father wanted to call me selfish, then fine. I would be selfish. But I would survive on my terms this time. A week later, I got a job offer from a small marketing firm in town. The owner, Daniel, had seen my freelance portfolio online and called me in for an interview. He was in his mid-30s, with kind eyes and a calm voice, the sort of person who didn't speak to fill silence. So, you're from the city? He asked as we sat across from each other in a sunlit office that smelled faintly of coffee and sea salt. Yeah, I said. Just needed a change. He smiled, leaning back in his chair. Most people who end up in Brentmore Bay do. Change or escape. His words hit deeper than he knew. I managed a small laugh, though my voice wavered. Maybe a bit of both. He hired me that same day. Working there felt grounding. For the first time, my creativity wasn't something to hide. My coworkers liked my ideas, trusted my judgment. I was finally building something that was mine, not built out of guilt, not built to save anyone else. But peace never lasts when your past is a storm waiting to find you. 2 months into my new life, I got another message, this time from my sister, Lila. Lila. Ava, please. Dad's sick. He's asking for you. I stared at her words for a long time. My throat tightened, but not from fear, from disbelief.
It was always something.
Always another emergency. Still, guilt is a powerful chain. I called home. My father didn't answer, but Lila picked up. Her voice trembled. He's in the hospital. He had a mild stroke. He keeps asking for you. The sound of her crying was enough to make my chest ache. I hated that part of me, the part that still cared. Which hospital? I asked quietly. She told me. By midnight, I was on the road again. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and worry. I walked through the corridor, my heart pounding, until I saw him, my father, lying pale against the white sheets, tubes running from his arm. He looked smaller than I remembered. When his eyes opened and met mine, something shifted. Not warmth, not love, just calculation. Ava, he croaked. You came. I heard you were sick, I said softly, standing by his bed. He smiled weakly. You're a good daughter. I knew you wouldn't abandon us. I swallowed hard. Abandon us. The words tasted like poison. Then he said the thing that shattered whatever pity I had left. Your sister's debt has gotten worse. If I die, who will take care of it? You're the responsible one. I froze. My mouth went dry. Are you serious? He looked at me, his face calm, almost expectant. Family takes care of family.
You have a good job now.
You can fix this. My heart dropped into something cold and hollow. All the guilt, the fear, the years of being used, they rushed up at once. I stared at him, really stared, and for the first time I didn't see my father. I saw a man who had never loved me beyond what I could provide. I'm sorry you're sick, I said, my voice shaking. But I'm not saving her this time. His eyes hardened. Don't you dare walk away again. But I did. I turned and left his room, my hands trembling, my chest burning. By the time I reached the parking lot, tears were blurring everything. That night, as I drove back to Brentmore Bay, something inside me broke, and something else was born. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was exploitation dressed as love. They wanted me to pay for their mistakes, to carry their sins, to live half a life while they burned through theirs. No more. If my father wanted to use guilt as a weapon, I would learn to use silence as mine. If my sister wanted to ruin me with her debts, I would show her what it meant to lose something she couldn't buy back. I didn't know what that revenge would look like yet. But as I drove through the dark highway, headlights slicing through rain, I knew this. I was done being the victim in their story. It was time to write my own. The next morning, Brentmore Bay looked different. Maybe it was the light, or maybe it was me. The waves no longer looked like something to escape to. They looked like a mirror, endless and honest. I stood there for a long time, coffee in hand, watching the horizon blur with a mist. For the first time in years, I felt anger. Not just the small, passing kind, but deep, structured anger. The kind that makes you see everything clearly. All my life, I'd been raised to believe that loyalty meant sacrifice, that family meant obedience, that love meant debt. But what if it didn't? What if love wasn't supposed to hurt this much? I opened my phone and scrolled through old texts, the countless messages from Lila asking for a little help or just one more loan. She always promised to pay it back. She never did. I opened one message from 2 years ago, one I'd forgotten until now. Lila, please, Ava. I'll lose everything if you don't help. Dad will be so disappointed. I remembered that night vividly. I'd sold my car the next day to send her $8,000. She said she needed it to pay off a gambling debt. Later, I found out she'd gone on vacation to Greece with her boyfriend instead. The betrayal back then had felt like being punched in the lungs. But this time, remembering it didn't hurt, it fueled me. I wasn't going to send her another dime. I was going to expose the truth. That week, I took a few days off work. Daniel didn't ask why, just gave me a nod that said he understood without needing to. I appreciated that kind of silence, the kind that didn't demand explanations. I drove back to my old city, not to visit, not to reconcile, but to investigate. My first stop was a cafe downtown. It was the kind of place Lila loved to show off on Instagram. Velvet chairs, gold-rimmed cups, and overpriced pastries. I sat there for an hour, watching the door, waiting. And sure enough, she walked in. Lila always had a flair for drama, long, honey blonde hair perfectly styled, designer sunglasses even indoors, and that walk that screamed, "Look at me." She was 27, 3 years younger than me, but she'd mastered the art of looking helpless and desirable at once. She didn't see me. She sat near the window with a man I didn't recognize, older, probably mid-40s, in a tailored suit. They leaned close, whispering. The man handed her a small envelope. She smiled, that same sugary smile she used to manipulate everyone. Something clicked in my head. I snapped a picture with my phone. A few minutes later, when she left, I followed, keeping my distance. She got into a black Mercedes. Not hers, I knew that much. The license plate was registered to a man named Harlan Beck, a name I'd soon learn belonged to a notorious loan broker in the city. So that was it. She hadn't stopped dealing with shady people. She was neck-deep again. And this time, she wanted me to bail her out of a pit she kept digging herself into. No more. The next step came naturally. I went home, to the house I hadn't stepped into in 2 years. The neighborhood was the same, quiet and suffocating. Our family house stood at the corner, tall and tired. The garden was overgrown, the paint peeling. My father's old truck still sat in the driveway. I parked down the street and watched for a few minutes before walking up the path. My hand hesitated on the door. I had keys still, though I wasn't sure why I'd kept them. Maybe some part of me had always hoped I'd return, to forgiveness, to closure. But the moment I stepped inside, that hope died. The air was thick with dust and memories. Family photos lined the hallway, me and Lila as children, Mom smiling between us. But I saw it now, what I hadn't before. In every picture, I was looking at the camera. Lila was looking at herself. My father's voice echoed faintly from the living room. He was on the phone. I froze and listened. She'll cave. She always does. She owes it to this family. Lila's her sister. He laughed, that dry, hollow laugh I'd grown up fearing. I stepped back, heart pounding. So even now, after everything, he still saw me as the fallback plan. The reliable one.
The fool.
I turned and left before he could see me. I didn't want another confrontation. Not yet. I needed facts, not emotion. That night, I stayed in a small inn across town and began piecing things together. Through public records and a few old contacts from college, I traced Lila's financial history. She had 3 open loans under her name, totaling nearly $42,000. 2 of those loans were linked to a shell business she'd created, Lila Events and Design. The company was inactive, but the payments were ongoing. But the 3rd loan, that one made my blood run cold. It was in my name. The document listed me as a co-signer. The signature was forged, a sloppy imitation of mine. That's when it hit me. My sister hadn't just asked for money. She'd stolen it. She'd taken my name, my credit, my future, and used it as collateral for her mess. I sat there, shaking, staring at the screen. For years, I thought she was careless. But this was calculated. She hadn't made mistakes. She'd made decisions. And suddenly, my father's insistence that I help her made sense. He knew. He'd known all along. Maybe he'd even encouraged it. That night, something inside me crystallized. Not rage, not exactly. Something colder. Revenge. Not through violence or shouting.
No.
Mine would be slow, surgical, and devastating. I started by gathering proof. Emails, bank statements, screenshots. I built a folder, digital and physical, with everything tying Lila's fraud back to her. I hired a private investigator, pretending to be an employer verifying background information to confirm her dealings with Beck. Within 2 weeks, I had enough to ruin her financially and legally. But that wasn't enough. Not yet. I didn't just want her to face consequences. I wanted her to feel what it was like to lose everything she took for granted. So I reached out to Daniel. He was surprised to see me in his office late one evening. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting down his coffee. I hesitated. "I need your help. It's personal." He nodded. "Go on." "I need to design a campaign. A brand exposure project, fake, technically. It's for a person who's been lying to people, taking money under false pretenses. I want her to see her own mask fall off." He frowned, studying me. "This about your sister?" I didn't answer directly, but my silence said enough. He leaned back. "If you're going to do this, make sure it's worth it. Make sure you can live with it." "I already can," I said quietly. And I meant it. Over the next month, I worked like someone possessed. I created a social media campaign, polished, subtle, anonymous. It hinted at a well-known influencer who built her lifestyle on fraud and deceit. I didn't name Lila, but I didn't have to. She'd made herself too visible. Every dinner, every shopping spree, every designer outfit paid for with borrowed money. Within days, whispers started circulating. Local gossip pages picked it up. Clients canceled partnerships with her brand. She posted a teary video online, claiming to be the victim of a smear campaign. But public sympathy faded when screenshots of her loan statements started leaking, not from me, but from Beck's associates, who'd had enough of her unpaid debts. Her downfall unfolded faster than I expected. Her accounts were frozen. Her so-called friends disappeared. She called me dozens of times. I never answered. One night, she sent a message that nearly broke me. "Lila, Ava, please. They're threatening me. I know I've hurt you, but I'm scared.
Please talk to me."
I stared at her words for a long time. I wanted to delete them, but I couldn't, because underneath all the anger, there was still that small, wounded part of me, the part that remembered sharing a bed as kids, whispering secrets in the dark. But then I remembered my forged signature, my drained savings, my father's cold voice, and I turned my phone off. 2 weeks later, I drove back to the coast. Brentmore Bay was quieter now, the kind of quiet that felt earned. I stood on the pier at sunset, wind tugging at my hair, and breathed in the salt air. Daniel joined me after a while, standing beside me without speaking. Finally, he said, "So, did you get what you wanted?" I thought about it. About Lila's tears, my father's silence, the emptiness that came after justice. "I got what I needed," I said finally, "but it doesn't feel like I thought it would." He nodded. Revenge never does. We stood there for a long time, the waves breaking softly below us. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like anyone's savior or scapegoat. I was just Ava, bruised, tired but free. Still, deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Because people like my father and sister don't disappear quietly. And if they were capable of destroying me once, they might try again. But next time, I'd be ready. 3 months passed. 3 quiet, deceptively peaceful months. From the outside, everything in my life seemed calm again. I'd settled into my work at the design firm, found small routines that grounded me, morning coffee by the window, evening walks by the shore, the gentle rhythm of a life that finally felt mine. But beneath that calm, something darker stirred. Revenge doesn't just end when the target falls. It lingers, in whispers, in guilt, in the way silence sometimes feels louder than chaos. At first, it was subtle, a news headline here, a social post there. Local influencers' brand collapses amid fraud allegations. Families silent amid controversy. I'd scroll past them, pretending not to care. But every time I saw my sister's photo, that same unease twisted in my chest. Then, one night I got the call. It was almost midnight. I was half asleep when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello." Silence. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Ava." My father. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. His voice sounded older, cracked at the edges, but still unmistakable. "What do you want?" I said coldly. "I didn't know who else to call," he said. "It's Lila." My stomach clenched. "What about her?" "She's in the hospital." I sat up straight. "What happened?" He paused. I could hear the tremor in his voice. "She tried to take her own life." The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air, meaningless and heavy. "She overdosed on pills," he continued. "They found her in her apartment. She's stable now, but—" He trailed off. I gripped the edge of my blanket, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she needs you," he said simply. "You're her sister." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. She didn't need me when she forged my signature, or when she drained my savings, or when she turned my life into a disaster. "She made mistakes," he snapped, the old authority creeping back into his tone. "But she's family." "Family?" I hissed. "You mean the same family that demanded I pay for her crimes? The same family that turned their back on me when I refused?" There was silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "You've made your point. But she's broken now, Ava. Don't make me bury both my daughters." The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the window. The moonlight cut across my face, making my eyes look unfamiliar, colder, harder. Was this what I'd wanted? To see her suffer? Maybe it was. Maybe some part of me had wished for her to feel even a fraction of the pain she caused me. But this wasn't victory. It was hollow. Still, something in me, something I couldn't quite name, made me get up, grab my coat, and drive. The hospital was half empty when I arrived, the air sterile and cold. I told the nurse my name, and she led me down a long hallway. When I stepped into Lila's room, I froze. She looked fragile. Not the glamorous, manipulative version of her I remembered, but small, almost childlike. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked, her once perfect hair tangled on the pillow. Tubes ran into her arms, the steady beep of a monitor filling the silence. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to move. Then her eyes fluttered open. When she saw me, they filled with tears. "Ava." I swallowed hard. "Hey." She tried to sit up, but winced. "I didn't think you'd come." "Neither did I said softly. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that pressed against your chest and demanded to be filled. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for things to go that far. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed." "You forged my name, Lila," I said quietly. "You took everything I had." She turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad told me you'd help. He said you'd understand. He said you always do." Of course he did. Even now, she was still following his script, the helpless daughter, the victim of circumstance. But then, her voice broke in a way that caught me off guard. I didn't want to live like this anymore. Every day felt like pretending. Every lie just made it harder to breathe. And for the first time, I believed her. I stayed for a while, longer than I'd planned. The nurse came in, adjusted her and left us alone again. At one point, she reached for my hand. "I missed you," she whispered. I didn't pull away, but I didn't say it back. When I finally left, dawn was breaking outside, soft light spreading over the parking lot. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the hospital entrance, torn between pity and fury. Somewhere deep inside, I realized what revenge had cost me. It hadn't just taken her reputation. It had taken me. The girl who once believed in second chances, who loved her family despite everything. That girl was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, lonelier. And yet, I couldn't regret it completely. Because without that hardness, I'd still be under their control. A week later, I got another call. This time from a number I recognized immediately. Dad. He didn't waste time on greetings. "You think you've won, don't you?" he spat. "You think destroying your sister makes you better than us?" I sighed. "You're unbelievable. She's in a hospital bed because of what you did. The pressure, the lies, the guilt you put on her." He laughed, cold, bitter. "Don't twist this, Ava. You were the one who turned your back. You ruined her. You ruined us." There it was. The same manipulation, the same shifting of blame. "No," I said firmly. "You ruined us the moment you taught her that love means control. The moment you made me believe I owed you everything." He was silent for a long time. Then his voice softened, dangerously so. "You'll regret this. Family always finds its way back together, one way or another." Then he hung up. For days, his words echoed in my head. Family always finds its way back together. It sounded less like a warning and more like a threat. By the end of the month, I knew I couldn't stay in Brentmore Bay. I loved that small coastal town, the calm, the ocean breeze, the feeling of rebuilding. But every shadow felt heavy now. Every phone vibration made my chest tighten. So one evening, I packed a small bag, wrote Daniel a short note thanking him for everything, and left. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not this time. I drove for hours, past sleepy towns, endless fields, until I reached the mountains. I rented a cabin there, simple, quiet, hidden. It was there, surrounded by pine trees and solitude, that I finally began to heal. Days turned into weeks. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since Mom was alive. The colors came out dark at first, Stormy blues, muted grays, but slowly they grew lighter.
Softer.
It was strange, realizing that peace doesn't come with closure. It comes with acceptance of loss, of imperfection, of the things you can't fix. Sometimes at night I'd think about Lila, wonder if she recovered,
If she blamed me.
if she hated me. I'd think about my father, too, whether he'd ever understand what he'd done to both of us. But I didn't reach out. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone anything. One morning, I woke to an email notification. The sender's name made my heart skip, Lila. I hesitated, then opened it. Subject: Thank you.
Ava.
I don't know where you are, but I wanted you to know I'm okay. I'm in therapy now. I've cut ties with Dad. It's hard, but it feels right. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. I don't expect you to respond. But I want you to know that your silence, your disappearance, saved me. It forced me to see what I'd become. I hope one day you'll forgive me, even if we never see each other again. Lila. I read it 3 times before closing my laptop. Then, for the first time in a long time, I cried, not out of anger or regret, but relief. Maybe there was hope, after all. Not for the past, but for what came after. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I stood outside my cabin, the air cool and still. I whispered into the quiet, goodbye. To my father. To Lila. To the version of myself who always carried their burdens. The wind carried it away, soft and final. And in that moment, I realized something simple. Something I'd spent my whole life searching for. Freedom wasn't running away. It was choosing yourself and not apologizing for it. I wasn't expecting the letter. It arrived one gray morning, 3 years after I'd vanished. I had built a quiet life in a coastal town where nobody knew my name. The sea had become my only friend, its rhythm, my therapy. I rented a small, sun-faded apartment above a cafe, spent mornings sketching and afternoons whitewashing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. No father's disapproving gaze. No sister's manipulative voice. Just me. Then came that envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, and bore my old home address crossed out in heavy ink, forwarded from place to place until it somehow found me. My hands trembled as I turned it over. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, controlled. My father's. For a full 5 minutes I just stared at it. My heart hammered in my chest, the sound louder than the waves crashing outside. I didn't want to open it. Part of me feared it would drag me right back into the chaos I had escaped. But curiosity, that dangerous old friend, got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His words were blunt as always. Nora, your sister is in trouble again. She's gone too far this time. She's asking for you. If you have any decency left, come home. No, I miss you. No, I hope you're well. Just an order disguised as an appeal. I crumpled the paper in my fist. The same anger that had fueled my escape came rushing back, hot and suffocating. My father's words always had a way of making me feel small, no matter how far I'd come. But then, I saw the name that haunted me, my sister. The last time I'd seen Lily, she had been standing in the doorway, her eyes swollen with fake tears, watching me pack my things while whispering to Dad that I was selfish, ungrateful, heartless. She got everything, the money, the sympathy, the protection. And now, she was in trouble again. I wanted to throw the letter away. Burn it. Pretend it never arrived. But I couldn't. That night, I lay awake listening to the ocean beat against the rocks. My mind replayed every memory I had buried. My sister's laughter when we were kids, her arms around me after our mother died, and then the gradual decay of that love into envy, deceit, and manipulation. Could people change? Could she change? I didn't know. But I did know that no matter how far I ran, the past had a way of chasing me down. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would go back, not for them, but for myself. To close the chapter properly. To see with my own eyes what had become of the family that once broke me. The bus ride back to my hometown felt like traveling through a graveyard of old ghosts. Familiar fields rolled past, the same diner where Dad used to stop for black coffee, the same billboard that had once advertised my sister's jewelry shop before it went bankrupt. When I finally stepped off at the station, the air smelled like rain and old memories. Everything looked smaller, the streets, the houses, even the fear I'd once carried. I walked to the address printed on the letter. My childhood home was gone, sold years ago. Dad now lived in a modest brick house at the edge of town. The curtains were drawn, the paint chipped, the garden overgrown. Time hadn't been kind to him. I hesitated before knocking. When the door opened, I barely recognized him. His hair was white, his back hunched, his once thunderous voice now raspier, weaker. For a moment, he just stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. Then, without a word, he stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled of dust and regret. Family photos still hung on the wall, but one frame caught my eye, a picture of Lily and me as children, grinning on the swings. I hadn't seen that photo in years. He noticed where I was looking and muttered, "She's not the same anymore." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice small. He sighed and sat down heavily in the old recliner. "She got involved with the wrong people again. Gambling, bad loans, you name it. I bailed her out twice. Sold the car, took out a mortgage. But this time, they're threatening her. She's sick, Nora. Not just in trouble, she's sick." A cold ache spread through my chest. "Sick. Leukemia," he said quietly. "Stage 3. She's at St. Mary's Hospital." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. I didn't know whether to feel angry, heartbroken, or numb. For all the resentment I carried, hearing that my sister, the same woman who betrayed me, was dying cracked something inside me. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Maybe he didn't have one. Maybe he just didn't want to admit that pride had kept him silent all those years. I left the house before he could say anything else. The hospital was quiet when I arrived. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, nurses walked briskly past, and every step I took echoed down sterile hallways. When I reached her room, I froze. Through the glass window, I saw her, Lily, pale, fragile, hair gone, eyes sunken but unmistakably hers. She was staring at the wall, lost in thought. For a moment, I couldn't move. All the years of bitterness melted into something simpler, grief. I walked in slowly. She turned her head, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Nora?" Her voice cracked like a dry leaf. I nodded. "Yeah, it's me." She began to cry. Not the manipulative sobs I remembered, but real, broken ones. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But I got Dad's letter." She let out a weak laugh. "He never changes, does he?" "No," I said softly. "He doesn't." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I messed everything up. I hurt you. I hurt everyone. And now, I don't even have time to fix it." Her words sliced through me. All my rehearsed anger, my speeches about betrayal, they meant nothing now. The sight of her hooked up to 4 lines, trembling hands clutching the blanket, made revenge seem hollow. "I forgive you," I said quietly. She blinked in surprise. "You what?" "I forgive you, Lily. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to." Her lips trembled. "I don't deserve you." "No," I said, a tear slipping down my cheek. "But you're still my sister." We talked until visiting hours ended, about childhood memories, about Mom, about all the years lost between us. She told me about the people she got involved with, the debts that spiraled out of control, and how she thought Dad could protect her from everything. "I thought you were stronger," she said suddenly, looking at me. "You left. You built a life. I envied that. I told myself you abandoned us, but really, I just wanted your courage." I couldn't stop the tears then. For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as my enemy, but as a broken mirror of myself. That night, I stayed at the hospital, sitting in the chair beside her bed, watching her sleep. The machines beeped softly, the moonlight glowed on her pale face, and I realized, sometimes forgiveness isn't about freeing the other person. It's about freeing yourself. When morning came, I went home to rest. But as I walked through the quiet streets, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Her condition had worsened overnight. I ran all the way back, but by the time I reached her room, it was too late. She was gone. There was a strange peace in the air, like she had finally stopped fighting. I sat beside her one last time and whispered, "I hope you find the peace you couldn't find here." When I looked up, I saw my father standing in the doorway, silent tears streaming down his face. For the first time, he looked human. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. Something between us had shifted, maybe not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Later that night, as I packed my things to leave again, I found another letter. This one wasn't from my father. It was from Lily. The nurse said she had written it the night before. "Nora, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Thank you for coming back. I didn't deserve your kindness, but you gave it anyway. Tell Dad I'm sorry. Tell him to let you go, really let you go. You don't owe anyone anything. Live for yourself. That's the only way I can rest in peace." I pressed the letter to my chest and wept until I couldn't anymore. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel trapped by guilt or anger. I felt free, completely, painfully free. And maybe that was the real revenge all along, to live, to heal, to be happy in a world that once tried to break me. The day after Lily's funeral, the world felt muted. It was strange how silence could be so heavy. The air itself seemed to weigh me down as I stood by her grave, a single white lily trembling in my hand. The autumn wind swept through the cemetery, carrying the faint scent of rain and earth, the kind of scent that makes you feel both alive and hollow at the same time. Her name was etched into the granite stone, Lily Anderson, beloved daughter and sister. I ran my fingers over the letters. The irony of those words didn't escape me. Beloved sister. I had hated her once. Now I missed her in a way I didn't think was possible. I stayed long after everyone had gone. My father had left early, muttering something about not being able to bear it. I didn't blame him. The man had built his life on control, and grief is the one thing you can't command. I whispered, "Goodbye, Lily," and for the first time, I meant it, not as a farewell born of bitterness, but of release. That night, I went back to my father's house. It was almost empty now. He'd sold most of the furniture to pay for Lily's treatments. What remained was a skeleton of the home I'd grown up in, a cracked photo frame on the mantel, a stained rug, a few old books. I found him sitting in the kitchen, a bottle of whiskey half empty on the table, his hands trembling slightly as he poured himself another glass. He didn't look up when I entered. "You shouldn't have come back," he said quietly. "I had to," I replied. "For her." He exhaled, the sound heavy and tired. "You did more for her in 1 week than I managed in years." There was a long pause. The ticking of the old clock on the wall filled the silence. "I wasn't a good father, was I?" he finally asked. I hesitated. "No," I said truthfully. "You weren't." He didn't flinch. Maybe he expected that answer. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he murmured. "Raising you both tough. Teaching you responsibility. But all I did was push you away. I made you believe you owed me everything when I was the one who owed you." His voice cracked on the last words. I had never seen my father cry, not even at my mother's funeral. But that night, tears rolled down his weathered face, and for a moment, I saw the man beneath the armor, flawed, broken, human. I sat across from him. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. Just exhaustion. "I spent so long blaming you for everything," I said softly. "And maybe you deserve some of it. But I also see now that you were just lost, too. Mom's death broke all of us, didn't it?" He nodded slowly, staring into his drink. I didn't know how to handle the pain. So I turned it into control. Orders. Demands. It was the only way I knew how to survive. I looked at him for a long time, really looked. The proud, intimidating man I once feared had shrunk into a shadow of himself. And in that shadow, I found something unexpected, compassion. I reached out and placed my hand over his. He flinched at first, Then let it rest there. We can't change the past, I whispered. But we can stop living inside it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The storm that had raged between us for years finally began to quiet. The next few days passed slowly. We talked, awkwardly at first, then more freely. We shared stories about Lily, laughed over childhood memories, even argued once or twice. It wasn't easy, but it was real. One evening, I found an old box in the attic, filled with my drawings from when I was younger. Back when I dreamed of being an artist before life turned into a survival act. My father found me sitting on the floor surrounded by sketches of sunsets, oceans, and cityscapes. "You were always talented," he said quietly from the doorway. I smiled faintly. "You never told me that." "I didn't know how," he admitted. "I thought praise would make you weak. But I was wrong. It would have made you stronger." Something inside me shifted again, a small, fragile forgiveness forming like a sprout breaking through concrete. That night, I packed my bags. I told him I needed to go back, to the coast, to the life I'd built. He didn't argue. Instead, he nodded. "You've done your part, Nora. It's time to live your life now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded photograph, one of me and Lily as kids, standing in front of the piano we used to fight over. "Take it," he said. "So you remember the good parts, too." I took the photo. Our smiles, and it looked so innocent, untouched by resentment, by debt, by betrayal. Just two girls who thought the world was kind. As I stepped outside, he called after me, "Nora?" I turned. "I'm proud of you," he said, even if it took me too long to say it. The words hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. For years, I had chased that approval, and now that I finally had it, I realized I didn't need it anymore. But it still meant everything to hear it. When I got back to the coast, the sea greeted me like an old friend. The cafe owner hugged me and said she'd kept my little apartment upstairs, just in case. The simplicity of that gesture nearly brought me to tears. I returned to my sketchbook. At first, my hands shook, rusty from neglect, but soon the lines began to flow again. I drew the waves, the sky, the feeling of peace I hadn't known I was capable of. I poured everything, grief, love, forgiveness, onto the paper. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. Then, one day, I found myself standing at a local art fair, my paintings hanging on display under a tent. The one in the center, the one that caught everyone's eye, was called The Quiet After the Storm. It was a painting of the sea at dawn, gentle waves glowing under a pale pink sky. Peaceful, but not empty. Alive. A woman stopped in front of it and said softly, "It feels healing." I smiled. That's exactly what it is. Later that evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, I sat by the shore, the sound of the waves wrapping around me like a lullaby. I pulled out Lily's letter again, the one she'd written before she died. The edges were frayed now, the ink slightly faded, but her words still held power. "Live for yourself. That's the only way I can rest in peace." I whispered, "I'm trying, Lily. I really am." And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't running anymore. Not from debt, not from guilt, not from my past. Just moving forward, freely, quietly. I had spent so much of my life defined by other people's expectations, my father's control, my sister's mistakes, my own fear of disappointing them both. But now, standing there in the orange glow of sunset, I finally understood something simple yet profound. Freedom doesn't always come with revenge or justice. Sometimes it comes with acceptance, with the courage to forgive, to let go, and to start over. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The air tasted of salt and peace. In the distance, a child laughed, the sound carried by the wind, light and pure. I smiled because for the first time, it didn't remind me of loss. It reminded me of life. That night, I wrote a letter to my father, not to reopen old wounds, but to plant something new. "Dad, thank you for letting me go. I hope you find your peace, too. Love, Nora." I didn't know if he'd ever respond. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. But it didn't matter anymore. I folded the letter, sealed it, and left it by the window, the same way I had once left the world behind. Only this time, I wasn't disappearing. I was choosing to stay, to live,
To breathe.
to be free. And as the waves crashed softly in the distance, I whispered one final thought. Not to Lily, not to my father, but to myself. I'm home. It's strange how life rebuilds itself quietly, piece by piece, when you stop trying to control the shape it should take. A year had passed since Lily's funeral. The pain had softened, like an old bruise, no longer sharp, but still there if you pressed hard enough. My father and I spoke occasionally. Our conversations were simple about the weather, the garden, the little town events he attended alone now. But each call carried something I once thought impossible between us. Peace. I lived by the coast again in a small rented apartment above a coffee shop. The sound of the waves became my alarm clock, and the smell of roasted beans and sea salt filled my mornings. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was mine, and that was enough. I had started painting seriously again, not for anyone else this time, but because it healed me. My art became a mirror of my journey. Each brushstroke a piece of my past turned into something new. I didn't realize how much people connected with it until one day, the gallery owner in town asked if I'd consider a solo exhibit. He said, "There's something real in your work, Nora. Something raw that people feel." At first, I hesitated. Showing my art meant showing my story, all the grief, betrayal, and shame that had shaped me. But then I remembered Lily's last words, "Live for yourself," and I said yes. The day of the exhibit, I wore a simple white dress. The color felt symbolic, not of purity, but of a blank canvas, ready for new beginnings. The room was filled with the low murmur of people admiring my work, the scent of fresh paint, and the soft clinking of glasses. Each painting told a chapter of my life. There was debt, a dark, chaotic swirl of reds and blacks, the moment my father had demanded I pay for Lily's mistakes. There was the vanishing, painted in stormy blues, showing a small figure walking into the horizon. My escape. And then there was the quiet after the storm, the one that had sold before the show even opened. A calm sea beneath a pink sky, peace after years of chaos. But the one that stopped everyone in their tracks was Two Shadows. It depicted two girls sitting under a tree, one leaning her head on the other's shoulder, their faces soft with forgiveness. I painted it after reading Lily's last letter. It wasn't about what we'd lost. It was about what we'd finally understood. As I stood beside that painting, a familiar voice behind me said, "You always did love the ocean." I turned, and there he was, my father. He looked older. His once broad shoulders seemed smaller, his eyes tired but clear. He was holding a bouquet of wildflowers, awkwardly, like a man unfamiliar with tenderness. "Dad," I breathed. He nodded toward the paintings. I had to see it for myself. I didn't know what to say. 1,000 emotions warred inside me, surprise, guilt, love, even a hint of pride. He stepped closer, staring at Two Shadows. "This one," he swallowed. "It looks like you and Lily." "It is," I said quietly. "It's how I like to remember us." He nodded slowly. "She'd be proud of you, Nora." I think she'd be proud of both of us, finally. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, two people who had once been enemies in grief, now finding common ground in silence. He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry for everything. For what I made you feel. For the debt. For not seeing you." The words trembled out of him, fragile but sincere. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear them until tears blurred my vision. "I forgave you a long time ago," I whispered. "I just needed time to mean it." He smiled, a real, human smile. "Then I can live with that." We stayed for a while, walking through the gallery together. I told him the stories behind each painting. He listened, not as a critic or a parent, but as a man finally learning who his daughter truly was. When the night ended, he hugged me. The first hug we'd shared in more than a decade. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't long, but it was enough. After he left, I stood outside under the stars, the cool breeze tangling my hair. I thought about everything that had brought me here. Every wound, every betrayal, every choice to stay or walk away. It all led to this moment of quiet triumph. The next morning, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. My father. Nora, I sold the house. The memories were too heavy to live with. I'm moving to the lake, somewhere peaceful.
Don't worry about me.
For the first time in years, I'm learning to breathe again. Thank you for showing me what strength really looks like. Love, Dad. I held the letter against my chest, tears spilling silently. It wasn't closure in the traditional sense, it was something gentler. A bridge where there used to be a wall. Months later, I visited him at the lake. His small cabin overlooked calm, glassy water. He'd built a small garden, filled with wildflowers and a wooden bench overlooking the shore. I sit here every morning, he told me. Feels like she's still around somehow. We didn't need to say her name. We both knew he meant Lily. We spent the weekend together, cooking, laughing awkwardly, even arguing once when he tried to overseason the stew. It was messy and real, the kind of love we never had before. As I left, he said, "You know, you don't owe anyone anything anymore, Nora. Not me, not Lily. You've done enough." I smiled. I know. Driving back to the coast that evening, the sky exploded into a sunset of purples and golds. I rolled down the window, the wind rushing through my hair, the world open and wide again. For so long, I had defined myself by what others demanded: daughter, sister, provider, escapee. But now I was simply me. Just Nora.
No debts.
No guilt. No ghosts. A few months later, I held another exhibit. This one was different, brighter, freer. The centerpiece was a painting titled "Letting Go." It showed a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, wind in her hair, watching paper boats drift into the ocean. Each boat carried a word: guilt, fear, regret, anger. And in the corner, in small, steady letters, one more word floated alone: peace. As people admired the painting, I realized something profound. My art wasn't about pain anymore. It was about transformation. Every color, every stroke, was proof that I had turned survival into beauty. Later that night, I walked to the shore with a small candle in my hand. I lit it, placed it in the water, and watched as it drifted away, a single light fading into the distance.
It was my goodbye.
To the girl who once carried everyone's burdens. To the sister who never got to see me free. To the father I once feared and now forgave. The tide pulled the candle gently away, and I whispered into the night, "Thank you." The wind carried my words across the waves. In the distance, the horizon glowed faintly, not with fire, but with morning light. And in that quiet, I finally understood something I never had before. You can disappear from your pain without disappearing from yourself. You can walk away and still come home. And sometimes, the truest form of revenge isn't destruction, it's peace. It's living so fully, so freely, that the ghosts of your past can't follow you anymore. That's what I did. I disappeared once to survive.
But now,
I live to be found. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real ending.